Welcome back to Shred and Soul.
I'm Shred, aka Kevin Wood.
And I'm Soul, aka Wind Hughes. This is episode 2, and we're excited to be back and welcome each and every one of you back with us. We've been talking about the different topics that we wanted to share with you, and one that keeps coming up between us a lot and with our friends and clients, people we work with, is aging, what it's like to be older, how we feel about being older, and what it looks like when we look back on our lives. So we thought maybe we would go back and look at all the different stages of our lives and how they were similar or how they're different, and what our thoughts were and feelings were at that time, and then bring it forward to where we are now. And I'm sure some of you will be able to relate, maybe not, but I think it's something that we all think about and are living.
It's certainly something we all experience, life stages. For me, I think I'll start out with my high school days, since that's probably most people's most formative time of life. Um, Aside from the neuroses that can be caused by early childhood, but let's not go there. Um, I think high school was for me where I determined where I would lay my seeds. I guess that's an expression, right? Lay my seeds or sow my
Sow
seeds.
your
Sow
seeds
my seeds.
or your oats.
Yes. And so I started becoming interested in guitar music and rock and roll, listening to Ted Nugent, Kiss, Alice Cooper, um, and developing a real interest in rock and roll and especially guitar playing. Um, I was always so captivated by the heavy sounds of loud, distorted guitars. Back in my early childhood days, I think Badfinger, Baby Blue had that great riff. Long Cool Woman by the Hollies had that great riff. Anyway, I decided to start playing guitar. And I think I thought that I could just basically put my hands on the thing and it would magically play music. I tried out for a band and I remember playing the guitar, not really knowing anything about it, just placing my hands on the neck and hitting the strings. And then after I auditioned, I overheard some of the guys saying, "Oh, that Kevin Wood, man, he cannot play." So anyway, I decided I would probably need to spend a little more time doing that, learning how to play.
Was guitar your main focus at that point in your life? I mean, that's what was happening and nothing else?
No, I was into partying and driving my car around and hanging out with my girlfriend. But I think it was something that really took over my main interest in life. It was so fun to go to shows, especially the big rock concerts of the day, and watch the guys play. And I think by the time I saw KK Downing do this Sinner solo in front of me, like literally in front of me in 1979, I was convinced that that was something I had to do with my life.
It's so interesting to listen to you talk about those years and how music was your focus. Like that was it. That's what that time of life was about for you.
It was, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember at that time I didn't watch any television. I didn't spend any time doing anything that wasn't related or having music involved. Listening to music. It was back in the day when you would get together with people and listen to the new album.
Yeah,
It was,
beginning to end.
yeah,
So I'm listening to you, and we have this awareness often is that at this point in our life, we are so compatible and we have such very, very different lives, very different. So for me, my memories go back to early childhood, growing up in Brooklyn, New York City, and what it felt like to be a child. I mean, that's where I go back to how it felt to feel so free and wondering who I was. And I used to look at the stars. I write about this in my book, looking at the stars and feeling that that was my home, and literally feeling at 6, 7, 8 in those years that this wasn't home. So I had this feeling inside me that propelled a lot of my life. And family life was a big thing for me. It was an Italian-Irish family in Brooklyn, you can imagine. My father had passed away when I was 1, so it was my mother and her side, which was the Italian side, more frequent than my father's side, which was the Irish side. And so that culture was a huge part of my upbringing, and very Catholic, and that was definitely a part of my reality. And I remember one day asking my grandmother, who had 6 children of her own, and I can't remember now, 14 grandkids, and was very busy, always cooking. Grandma was always cooking. And I remembered asking her one day at our regular Sunday dinners, which were beautiful, Grandma, how could God, it says in the Bible, maybe in the bottle for some people too, but for me, I was referencing the Bible. It says there that, is, now, and ever has been. And I remember asking her, Grandma, how could that be? Is, now, and ever have been. There has to be a beginning and an end. And in her way, which could be stern sometimes, she said, don't you ever question God. You never question the Bible. And those are some of the formative things for me, are learning to not question, and yet I questioned everything. So my young years were very vibrant and exciting and full of wonder. And then the 60s hit, and my high school years were brief. I was in special programs back then you were allowed to have programs for accelerated kids. It was the SB program, special progress programs. So I was always ahead and skipped a grade. And back in that time period, it was the 60s, so I was very aware politically what was going on, and had begun to have some significant spiritual experiences that were forming my life. And I just ran with the 60s. And definitely that's when music, other than the music of the 50s, I would sing with my mother and my aunts in the kitchen, Frank Sinatra and things like that. But that's when music became very personal, because most people know that the music of the 60s was integral to that time period, very political, very reflective, and it was awesome. Jimi Hendrix was my first rock concert that I ever saw, and that influenced me. And if you can imagine, he was opening for the Young Rascals, and became the superstar that he did. And for me, there was a lot of Grateful Dead and Led Zeppelin, Cream, Jefferson Airplane, things like that. And where I kind of merge into maybe where you came in with that was Black Sabbath and those hardcore groups, if you can imagine that they were considered metal in the day. But my young years in high school, I left high school in 10th grade. So I very quickly had a new stage in my life. While you were playing guitar and hanging out with your girlfriends, I became a mom at 15. So my high school years quickly transitioned into being on my own, getting married, having a child, and becoming very, very responsible. So when we talk about our youth and our history, we cross over a lot with the music, and cross over a lot with both having a lot of wild times, because we both did, and our actual realities of life were very, very different. Mine was very political, very spiritual, drug, sex, rock and roll sort of time, being in the 60s. And yours had a focus of a different nature.
Well, my focus didn't come until the 70s, but I do remember the 60s. And what really impressed me during that period of time was the quality of the music that you would hear. I mean, looking back, you would hear bands on the radio all the time with the most exceptional, high quality recording and production value. Um, I just picked up a album of the Carpenters' greatest hits at a thrift store the other day, and it's mint. Anyway, I played it, and as a kid, I would listen to that and go, "This is so schmaltzy, I can't stand it." But looking back, every one of these songs, I heard it a million times, and I heard it on an AM radio, and I fell in love with pop music. But when you listen back, you go, well, compared to the music my mom and dad listened to in the '50s, this music is far superior. It's recorded so much better, and I think it shaped how I developed into like audiophile music freak.
Mm-hmm. For sure you are.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that, just kind of looking at our notes and how we wanted to focus, I know for me, after that came a period of being family and parenting, which included college for me. I got my GED and then went off to college at, I guess 17-ish, and had my daughter in daycare. And so for me, the family years were doubled with survival, getting through school, a lot of it as a single parent. And for me, school was essential. I just felt that I loved learning. So learning became a huge part of my family years. But the focus definitely changed from myself and my needs to how to take care of my daughter, how to take care of a family. And that really changed things. And it was still the political movement as well, from a whole different perspective, because at one point in my single parenting, I became what they called a welfare mom. So while I was in school, I applied for social assistance, and that changed how I looked at things personally, because I became very disheartened and angry at the social systems as I was involved with them and how I saw things. So my political activism increased. My understanding of what poverty meant increased. And it changed how I looked at the world to suddenly have a different vantage point. How did your family years affect you? How did it shift your focus?
Well, my son was born when I was 28, and it was shortly after Andrew, my brother, joined Mother Love Bone, and I immediately jumped on board with the concept of having a son and having a family and everything that goes along with that. Whereas before I was able to be fairly carefree, I now have more responsibilities, but I I jumped on board with it with glee actually because it was something that was given to me, a little miracle, and so I never took my focus away from what I really wanted to do. But there was definitely a time when the importance of what I was doing as a father outweighed my wanting to bury myself in guitar and playing out and getting gigs and looking for music contracts and stuff like that. So I never really lost my focus, but I added a new focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's part of it too, adding a focus. And I know we've talked about the young years having children. It's so challenging. And I would very truly say that was one of the most amazing times of my life. I loved being a mom.
Mm-hmm.
Down the road a ways, I remarried and had my son. And so I have two children. And no matter what else I was doing, college, graduate school, music to um, theater, earlier on, I was a theater major. No matter what I was doing, I was having fun. And often people will say, oh my goodness, you were a parent so young. That must have been so difficult. And yeah, it was difficult when you have to worry about food on the table for another human being. But it wasn't always that way. But I loved it, that beautiful giggle and laughter and that joy of loving another being so much and feeling their unique, special presence was actually one of the most enjoyable times of my life.
Looking back at the times when I was raising my kids, and my kids were, like I said, I was 28 when Jasper was born, and Clara was born 2 years later. I was an adult. I mean, I was not in any way going and partying, wasting time. I think I got a lot more done actually as a father than before when I was single and carefree. Um, I was razor sharp focused on my goals and raising my kids. And when I look back at it, you can think, well, it must have been a struggle worrying about, putting food on the table and making rent and everything. It really wasn't. I mean, there were a couple times when, yeah, okay, we're coming up short. What are we going to do? But for the most part, everything, all needs were met. And I think that's, something that I feel very fortunate to be able to manifest is, yeah, everything is all your needs are being met.
So that's an interesting difference too, because there were certainly times in my life when all my needs weren't met. When Kim was little, Kimberly, my daughter, and I was on assistance trying to get through school, definitely my needs were not all met. You sort of resort to things that are a little sketchy to bring in a couple of extra dollars. And later on in life, when I was a single mom again with two kids in a graduate school, there was a time I ate potatoes for 2 weeks straight because I had no money, and the number one focus was feeding the kids. And I think those times really helped me deepen my sense of who I am and give me a wider experience. No one likes hunger. Don't get me wrong. I'm not glorifying hunger or poverty. Poverty sucks royally. And it also, though, gave me a deep understanding of a bandwidth of life I wouldn't have otherwise. So, yeah, we have some difference. And I know you had hard times too.
Well,
You've
yeah,
told me
I
about eating
mean,
food out of a can.
yeah, of course. I mean, there are times when things are not easy to come by,
Yeah.
and other times when there's lack of
Yeah.
things. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a cakewalk, but I look back in retrospect, and this is what I've done all my life. I look back in retrospect and realize, yeah, well, there were times when I was busy making things happen to put food on the table, do everything that needed to be done. But I think that the reward was that it really sort of came, and I'm not saying that I had like resources. I was on government assistance for a while, off and on, and not for very long. But I, through that, your needs are met, and of course, back in those days, rents were incredibly cheap.
Gosh, yeah. Well, you're
Gas
touching on
wasn't cheap.
something I think is really important, is that I think you and I both come from a place of feeling that ultimately we can create in our lives what we want, no matter what the circumstances. And I think you and I have both done that.
Hmm.
We've both been pushed to our edges. We both had kids, families to support, and your music journey, my education and creative journey, and writing books, and the things that I've done that we've both, I think, let's jump to maybe this vantage point. We both look back at life and have a sense, well, let me speak for myself, that I'm a different person than I was back then. The same inner being, even though I'm older and my hair is white, I look in the mirror and I'm shocked to see this face looking back at me because I still feel inside as I did as that, wild, crazy hippie chick running around having a great time with a kid on her back and getting through school and the wonder of life and all the amazing things that happen. But there is a confidence and a faith that comes that I would be able to get through anything that happened. Loss of loved ones, hard
Hmm.
times, loss of work, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or disappointment in a goal or a dream not happening, or coming to terms with that all of the goals and dreams and visions of the 60s, love and peace, didn't actualize in the way I'd ever imagined. I had to pay back my school loans. I truly believed the revolution was going to happen and equity for all would appear on the earth, and people would have awakened because it was a time of awakening. And I watched that change over time, and it was difficult for me, sometimes still is, that didn't end up in the way I'd imagined in my youth. But here we are, and life has been amazing. And here you are in my life. You're amazing, and we have a great life. But there's something about getting older that for me is freedom from any attachments to what was in the past, letting go of those disappointments, and a freedom to not give a damn about what the world out there thinks, and freedom to just be who we are and share who we are and love as we want to love. And I have faith in the world unfolding in an amazing way, and also with age, a realism that knows that the awakening of consciousness on this planet, as I imagined would occur, didn't happen as it did. And I think we're at a choice point as a people for whether we can awaken again, and that happen. We're at another Y in the road, and I have a lot of faith. And I know that it's up to each of us to become conscious beings and commit towards that vision of a new world and a better world.
That's not to say that from time to time during those years, there weren't times when there'd be a brief moment of terror or an inability to trust
Mm-hmm.
that all things would be fine, and everything usually does work out all right. And I think as I grow older, I know from experience that things usually turn out fine, but at the same time, I don't want to go to a place where I'm doubting that will happen, because I think, and a lot of us might do the same thing. We want to have a time in our lives that is carefree in regards to not having to worry about it, where you can say, well, things are fine right now. I'm not going to stress about what's going to happen. I'm just going to trust that when it does happen, when things change, the change will be fine.
That's changed for me at different times in my life. I think that's a segue. We have a few minutes left to talk about being older. Well, one of the things I know is that there were times in my life, such as when we had kids, independent of each other, and had children and were taking care of our families. I remember when my kids were grown and on their own, I had this amazing sense of another level of freedom. Not that I wasn't responsible as a parent anymore, but they were on their own, and I could focus back on me, which I'd almost really didn't have much at all in my life because I started so young. And I went off to Taos, New Mexico, a place where I wanted to live, and started a new life. I felt such freedom in that and such amazing joy and excitement in that. And then my first grandchild was born, and I had no idea how that was going to impact me. I was startled, but it was really beautiful because I suddenly had a sense of, oh, all right, more responsibility again in a beautiful way, that there was another young person that potentially could need me and to lean on me. And maybe I needed to focus back on earth a little bit and not be out there having such an exciting time in the wild, wild west, and a new sense, though, of meaning and purpose. And then coming to this stage, another focus is, how do we age and be able to take care of ourselves? How do we financially do that? And it's more of a struggle in the world.
Yeah, that's one of those terrifying moments that's just right around the corner.
Cat food cans in the pantry.
No, don't say that. Take that out of the law.
Take that out of the law.
We're vegetarians anyway, but
it becomes a concern again.
Well, it does. It can. But we always have to remember that life has shown us that things work out, and Kunahura, they will continue to.
We've done amazingly well at creating and manifesting what we've wanted. You know, getting this house that we bought, and moving to California, and your career.
Everything that we've set out to do, we've managed to in some way actually make that work. And, that's something that needs to be considered when you go down the road. Although a firm path for antiquity has not been established yet. I still feel like I'm pretty young, and I feel like I have a lot more in me. And so the thought of slowing way the heck down and getting super old and changing everything, I know that it'll happen, but I just don't feel it quite yet. I mean,
so you have to admit, you and I both get up off the couch with a couple of creaks and more slowly than ever, and we laugh about it as we get up, going, my back.
Mm-hmm.
I was hit by a car walking in a garage a number of years ago, going to see a Seahawks game at a pub. And I was hit by a car, and since then there's a lot of aches and pains, and I know you have them too. And that's something we come to terms with
Yeah, it's true.
getting older and how to stay vibrant and healthy.
Things definitely change physically as you grow older, and so that's definitely a sign that, yeah, I guess it really does happen.
The edge of the cliff, sometimes I describe it as we're lemmings. And there are lemmings in front of us as we get close to the jump off point. And as our parents pass away and that generation passes away, we are now the front row. Your mom is still here, so you have a buffer right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
But as the elders in our families transition to the next stage, we become the front lemmings. And at some point, we're going to be jumping off into the next adventure. And that is a different perspective for me, like climbing up a mountain in life, and then you're always getting up to the mountaintop, and then there comes the point where you're on the mountaintop, and wow,
Mm-hmm.
it's a different vantage point from up here. Now you're going to be heading down the mountain, and no judgment about up or down, just perspective. It's different.
Yeah, it is, because, and I think it's actually kind of cool that you consider it being on a mountain.
In what way?
Well, on a mountain means that you're elevated.
Yeah.
And if you had a negative frame of mind, you might think that as you grow older, you're digging your
Digging a
grave
hole.
one shovelful at a time each day. So I think Wendy and I are both in agreement that life is transcendent, and that we may not necessarily remember who we are when we pass away, but there's definitely something out there, something beyond just this existence. And
That's another whole episode in and of
yeah,
itself. And I want to touch in the future an episode on death and losing people in our lives and coming closer to our own deaths, because that's a topic that's difficult to talk about in this culture, but really important.
mhm.
Anything else you want to add before we close?
Has it been, are we
Is
done?
it time? Just about.
Wow. Well, it's always a pleasure to share, and looking forward to the next episode.
Yeah. And please add comments if you want. You'll be able to do that if you have any questions or thoughts, and
Hit
love to hear about
subscribe,
your life. Or hit subscribe, like,
don't
don't like, whatever it is, feedback. We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll have another episode that will come every Tuesday, as we've said before. Well,
Mhm.
thanks for hanging out with us.
See you again.
See you next time. Bye.